Okay, each and every week on Rockin'DFW, we're going to have a special guest, and today's special guest is the owner and president of Nomad Recording Studio, Gary Long. Gary, how you doing, Chief?
I'm fine. That's El Presidente.
El Presidente. Appreciate you taking time to be with us. Hey, man, give us some background on yourself. Where you from? Were you in music when you were, early in your years?
Well, I was born and raised in Colorado. I started playing music officially when I was 15 years old. Got my first instrument at the age of 15, drums. And it just evolved from there. I'm a self-taught musician, self-taught engineer, producer. Because of music, I've traveled all over and had a lot of great experiences, meeting a lot of people, and just having a great time.
When did you move to Texas?
I first moved to Texas in roughly 1985, and stayed here for a short time. After that, moving to the Los Angeles area. Tried that out for a while. That didn't work out, so the logical choice was come back here.
And at what point did you decide to get in the recording industry, and how did Nomad happen?
It's really kind of an interesting story. It was all accidental. I had no plan to own a recording studio whatsoever. A very good friend of mine named Ed Posey and I were writing music together, and we had a little rehearsal room which was just down the road from here that we rented from a guy, and it became increasingly more difficult to pay for the room. Ed had invested in some recording gear so we could archive the music we were writing together, and one day we just got this crazy idea that, hey, we'll record bands to make money to offset the overhead of the room. And so I made this little poster, which is hanging up right there. We were charging like $15 an hour. We put our home phone numbers on it, and all of a sudden the phone started ringing off the hook. People wanting to come and record. And it was a little 8-track reel-to-reel analog setup with a little 8-channel board and a few microphones. And the mic cables went over the wall. The drop tile ceiling was the divider. It started to take off. It started to roll. And Ed wasn't so inclined to want to pursue that direction, so he kind of pulled out. And at that point, I thought, well, I'm committed. I'll take out a loan from the bank and buy some gear. I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. Another friend of mine got involved. His name was Curtis, and he was a little more educated and experienced than I was as far as recording. So he helped guide me through the weeds, so to speak, and we managed to get us a 16-track analog machine and a little bit better board and some microphones. And then at that point, Nomad was officially established, 1990, right around 1990. And the rate went up slightly.
Naturally.
And it just sort of evolved from there. I used that format for a while, and as I made more and more money, I took more risks, taking out more loans to buy better equipment, eventually leasing some of the equipment. That's how I was able to get into the more big-ticket items. I moved from the small space down the road to the Crescent Drive location, and things just really kind of took off at that point because I had a bigger studio. I could accommodate more demands, and my clientele began to, as far as it became more high-end. I was getting more quality, more established artists as a result of that. And that's kind of how it went. And I've been doing it now for 24 years.
What were some of the what are some of the big artists that you've had had an honor to work with?
Well, Kirk Franklin, Merciful Fate, King Diamond, Dave Grohl, Cradle of Filth. Man, I mean, there's just so many. I'm drawing a blank.
Is there a favorite person that you had an honor to work with?
Izzy Stradlin, former Guns N' Roses guitar player, worked on several records. Actually, JT Longoria was the main engineer, but I did the mastering, and JT did the tracking and mixing. To name a few, worked with Todd from the Toadies, mean, it's just, there were so many artists. It's
List
hard
goes
to
on
work
and
with
on.
T.I., Tony Franklin, worked with, I wish I could remember his name. I mean, I'm not prepared.
Are you still doing music yourself?
Yes.
From time to time?
Mm-hmm.
How's that working out for you?
Right now, it's kind of on a hiatus. I was working in a band called Featherhead. We put out a 7-song EP, which was well received. It's a great album, collection of music, working with Tim Roberts and Neil Brinks. We do have another record that's in the can, so to speak. There's some tracking left to do, but it's very close to being finished. My hope is we resume sometime in the near future.
That's cool, man. What is you recently just moved from one building to the next with
Yes.
Nomad. What was it like going from a 4,000 square feet to a 750 square feet? And what was the underlying meaning behind that?
Relief. It was a huge weight lifted off my shoulders. The reason I did it was, part of it was that the economy.
Mm-hmm.
Another part of it was I've noticed over the last few years that the industry has changed. It's become increasingly more and more difficult to compete with the DIY mentality, which a lot of people are doing it themselves. It's become more and more evident every day, especially since I made the transition to this smaller facility. The smaller facility doesn't mean that I lack quality.
Mm-hmm.
The quality is still there. But now, because I've downsized, everything's more affordable to the client, and the clients are bringing me projects that they do themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Whether they go in a studio or whether they're doing it at home, that's the part that's unknown, because a lot of the product now comes to me via the internet. There's so many clients I work with, I never see them. We talk on the phone, we email back and forth, the files are sent to me, I do what I'm being commissioned to do, whether it be mastering, mixing, or overdubbing, whatever the case may be, and then the product is emailed back to the artist. Really kind of cool.
Is it something that works out better for you in the long run?
Best move I ever made. At the time, it was really hard to let go. It was kind of the pride thing, but fortunately, I could see it.
Mm-hmm.
It became evident like 10 years ago that this is where the industry was heading, because computers have basically, they've taken over as the main platform in a recording studio. The tape machine, though it still exists, is not being manufactured anymore. It's very difficult to even find blank tape to record on. So that being said, the people who manufacture this equipment also notice that, hey, we need to focus a lot of our energy and a lot of our resources on making what we do accessible to a broader audience, or we're going to go broke. So what is the end result is that all these people have smaller, very powerful recording systems that they can set up in their spare room in their house or their living room or wherever, and they can constantly, without surveilling the clock, record and create. And then they bring what they do at home to me. And I get a lot of that, where I'm just basically, I'll load the music in, and then I'm recording the vocals and mixing that.
What are some of your pet peeves to any new band coming to you to ask you to record their things? I mean...
Well, when I work with a band, I like to know about the band.
Exactly.
I like to know the lineup. I like to know the style of music. I like to know what their expectations are. I like to know how prepared they are. I want to be a part of that process. I don't want to blindly just say, yeah, I have a recording studio, come on in, I'll take care of it. I like for the band to be prepared, to know going in exactly what they're going to be doing and be prepared for that, be well rehearsed, and with a realistic goal in mind. And the realistic goal being, we have this much money, we want to accomplish this much. For me, it isn't about the money. The money's great, and it helps keep the doors open. But when you're working with the band, you want to help them realize their dream, their goal. And I have 3 favorite words that I just love to hear when they're walking out the door. We'll be back. So if if we can meet in the middle, then we'll be back as part of the conversation at the end. So be prepared, have fun, and have a realistic vision and a goal in the process.
Are there any misconceptions to the recording business?
In what way?
Well, you know, word of mouth. That kind of goes back to our last question. You know, you want a band to come in prepared, and what would happen if they didn't come in prepared? I mean, how would you handle that?
Well, it's happened before, and sometimes with disastrous results. It ends up costing the band a lot more money than they need to spend. In some cases, in my experience, I've actually seen a band fall apart or implode because of it. In other cases, I've seen like drummers or singers or guitar players be replaced in the process of the making of the record, mainly drummers.
A lot of fights break out, you think? A lot of discontent, disgruntlement, huh?
I've seen a couple of fights break out, yeah, in the parking lot and right in my control room. But the preparedness part, you know, that's something where I could get involved. Say I'm going to work with a band from the ground up on a record. I might request to come to their rehearsal room and listen to them play and listen, and they run through their repertoire. And then we talk about, okay, how many songs do you have? Oh, we've got 20 songs. We want to record 10. I said, well, I think that's realistic. You know, like you pick your 10 best songs. I encourage some guys to think about maybe going in a direction of doing an EP because you can spend more time on fewer songs. People, they go, well, why an EP? Well, say if you have 20 songs and you pick your 5 or 6 best, you record those, then you go back into your catalog and you rework the other 5 or 6 remaining, and you put that out. And then when you're at the table showing your merch, you got more product. That makes you look more established.
Have you seen a lot of that going on lately with, you know, the regular, 11, 12 song album being reduced down to 4 and 5?
Only in country music. Rock music, it's been a lot of EPs, you know. But when you think about it, I mean, you being a musician, wouldn't it be easier to focus on 5 songs and give it your all on those 5 than to be inundated with, oh my God, I got to do 10. And that equates into a lot of money.
And also a lot of pressure trying to get that done. Whereas each one of them sound real good, and you don't have the normal 1 or 2 fillers in there that didn't quite meet expectations or whatever. But
yeah, there's songs, as you probably well know, that I wish that wasn't on the record. I could have lived without that one or this one. But if you're in a band with multiple songwriters, then you have to deal with that dynamic. Like, well, I wrote that. Why can't it be on the record? All his songs are on the record. You know, the other thing that I might, try to explain to the band that it isn't about any one individual in the band. It's about the band as a whole. And the most important thing is what's best for the song. The song, in the end, it doesn't matter if you just hit the triangle one time in the song or you played a tambourine solo. Whatever you did, those little contributions, that's what makes the song, however big or small. You don't have to be all over the map with it. If the song is going to propel you to the next level or get you noticed, that's really the most important thing. You kind of have to check your ego at the door and focus on that.
I mean, what would you tell a band that would come in, and I'm sure you've had it numerous times it's happened, where they come in, they say, Gary, we want to sound like Pantera, or we want to sound like Dragonpool, or et cetera.
Well, first thing you say is, if I could get those guys over here to play your instruments, then we could make that happen. You're not going to sound just like that or like that. I mean, I understand why artists say that. They want to sound, that was their inspiration, and they're like sitting there going, oh, if my guitar could sound like Dimes, or if I could sound like Benny, or I could sound like this guy or that guy, that would just be great. I mean, I'm happy that the role models exist for these guys to aspire to be. Like, I want to be like that. I would say, well, why not, use that as a vehicle, like push yourself to be as good as that. In the process, try to think outside the box and reinvent yourself. so that the next guy might want to be just like you.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's a whole legion. I mean, a record comes out and there's 10 more bands that sound just like that band. You know, to me, when I think about music, the best bands were the ones who broke through and had their own individual style. You think about Pantera, I mean, it's been 20 years. But you think about it, when they came out, they weren't copying anybody.
Mm-hmm.
They were doing what they wanted to do. They evolved into what everyone knows them to be. I mean, when you listen to Dime's guitar playing, you don't hear him trying to sound like Billy Gibbons or Jimi Hendrix or Eddie Van Halen or Randy Rhoads, even though I'm sure he enjoyed listening to those artists. You know, he grabbed his guitar and what came out was him.
Yep.
And that's, and all of those other artists that I mentioned, that's what comes out when they play. That's their personality coming through the instrument. So I feel like it would be a shortcoming to say, we want to sound just like that, when the potential is to possibly be the next Pantera, in the sense that you don't sound like that. You sound like original, if I worded that right.
Yeah, it's originality. I was just asking that question because I know out in the scene, playing, I hear a lot of younger bands saying they want to be just like this band and this band, and I want to know if you still got that same feedback from anybody that comes in here. As a producer, do you find artists that'll give you free will to put your ideas in their music?
Yes. Once in a while, the band that I work with, Tim, the guitarist, he's an incredible songwriter. He'll bring song ideas in, and I will listen to the demo, and then I get an idea, and he's gracious enough to consider it and listen to it, and we experiment with it. And 7 out of 10 times, it's like, yeah, that's even better. That's cooler. I have worked with artists where they've given me a little more control to help mold the song or songs in a way that would be a little better. Because when you're inside the box, it's really hard to, to separate yourself. The process started in here, and then you're trying to get it out. Some artists are very staunchly opposed to having any input at all. And if that's how they want it, I'm cool with that. We'll just record it. And if they sit and listen, go, that's exactly what I wanted, great. Some artists come in and say, hey, can you help me with this? I'm not completely at ease with how all of this is put together, or what would you think about, what do you hear in the way of instruments that might enhance or change this song? And my job isn't to rewrite the song by any means, but I might hear like the song go, did you ever think about adding a violin to this, or a cello, or a keyboard, or a harmonica? The list goes on and on. It's wide open. If they give you that if they open that door for you, it could be a double-edged sword. You got to be very careful, because you don't want to completely change the identity of someone.
Yeah.
You want that that they're authentic, they're individual. You want to maintain as much of that as you can, but you can add things in the periphery that might promote them and push them up a little higher.
I know whenever I was in a band, and SAO, Strength is One, and we was doing our effing radio album in here, we allowed you to do that. You came to us and you had an idea, and we didn't think twice about it. You did it, and it really dictated that whole album, what you put in there. It was a great idea.
We got lucky. We got lucky.
Well, this is primarily a local show, so I had to ask this question because I was asked to ask you this question. Out of all the local artists around the Dallas area that you've had the privilege to work with, who are some of your favorites that you had to work with?
Oh, God. Well, that's a tough question. You can't really say King Diamond's local, but he lives here.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd have to say King is right up there. I'd have to say, Rivet Head, your band, Snarky Puppy. There again, I'm just drawing a blank because there's so many.
Yeah.
I'd have to, I wouldn't want to really single anybody out because everybody that came through that door had to be a favorite because of that, I was able to exist and maintain.
Yep.
So, I thank everybody that supported the studio in that way. I suppose when you talk about favorites, there were a lot of bands whose members became good friends of mine.
Yep.
And we have relationships that are outside the music and outside the studio, which is very cool.
Yeah, that's what it's all about.
And when that can go on, when that can exist beyond the business, that's really special.
Are you still doing your annual Nomad showcase at Trees?
I haven't done one in a couple of years because I was in the middle of this transition. And I wanted to get this up and running and get the wheels turning on it in a sort of a sense, so things were kind of solid. Mm-hmm. Because this was an experiment. I mean, I really just threw caution to the wind and said, I'm going to do this. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know it was going to work. I just had a gut feeling that this is what I had to do. And now that I'm in here and I've got stains in the carpet and chips in the paint, I feel like I'm at a place where I can start thinking about doing another one.
Are there any future projects for you coming up? Are you expanding? Are you doing anything else? For
me personally?
Or within Nomad? Either one.
It's just the day-to-day business, mastering, mixing. I do have another album I'm going to be producing with an artist out of Fort Worth. I produced an EP for him. His name's Caleb. He's a young guy, sort of a Tom Waits type artist, but he's coming back in with sort of a pop rock direction this time, so he's very versatile and all over the map. But that's all I can say at this point.
What happened to the old building that you used to be at Nomad?
The old building is still there. How do I put this? I was approached by another producer locally with the idea of forming a partnership. And at the time, I had considered it, but I wasn't really comfortable with the idea since I kind of had this vision of downsizing. I had never really had a partner the whole time I've been in business, and I didn't really feel like that's the direction I wanted to go in. So we had a few meetings, and we were able to arrive at a deal that we were both comfortable with. And I moved everything out, and he took over the space.
Who are some of the producers and engineers that work with you, and where are they now?
All right, well, I'll start with Cole Marshall. He lives in upstate New York. I met Cole when I was in the early stages of Nomad. He became a very good friend. And when I discovered the old studio that I just moved out of, Cole was very instrumental in helping me design and build that studio. It was pretty much Cole, my then wife, Karen, and myself who designed everything from the ground up and built it. So as it stands today, those are the authors of the result over there. There's JT Longoria, who's been working with me for 15 years now. He plays in a band called Silver Loves Mercury. He's got a couple of records out.
Good band.
And he's trying to get his foot in the door. There's John Congleton. John has become quite a in-demand engineer producer with an incredible list of clients. Sterling Winfield, everybody knows Sterling. Mm-hmm. Sterling came from working at Dallas Sound Lab. He worked with Pantera, Hell Yeah, and a plethora of hard rock, metal, R&B, soul, country. Sterling's done it all. Sterling and I are still very good friends. He has his own place now where he works. Let's see, there's Tim Kimsey, who introduced me to everyone. Mm-hmm. I pretty much owe Tim my life on that one. Tim teaches at MediaTek, and he's a freelance sound engineer, recording engineer. There's Chris Godby. Chris worked with me for many years, and then eventually got the call and began working for Timberland about 6 years ago His first record with Timberland was Chris Cornell. Since then, Chris has worked with Usher, Jennifer Hudson, Justin Timberlake, Jay-Z, Beyonce, and the list goes on. Rick Greenwood worked with me for a brief period. He lives in Denton now. He's a college student. I know I'm leaving somebody out. Just know I am.
The list is long.
But it's a long list of great people. Great people. Erik Hartman. I met Erik Hartman through Chris Godby. Erik's a great engineer, producer. He has his own place near downtown. Erik works in the genre, he works in many genres of music, most notably gospel, R&B. He worked on the Snarky Puppy record that was nominated and won a Grammy this year. And Barry Sailing worked with me for a brief period. Barry's a great recording engineer, producer. He introduced me to Loaded Moses and In Memory of Man. Barry's also a sound engineer, a live sound engineer. So that pretty much completes the list of people that darken the door, so to speak, at Nomad. And because of that list of people, I'm still here today.
What are some of the gears you specialize in here? Well,
in the old studio, as you recall, I had the large format mixing board.
Oh, yeah.
I've shied away from that. I don't really need that anymore, and that's part of the advancements in technology. What I use now is use Pro Tools HD, and I used all Dangerous Music components, the Dangerous 2 bus, which is a summing bus unit that works much like a console. This allows me to sub the mix out to 16 tracks. So it gives the mixes a lot of depth and transparency. Instead of mixing through the 2 bus of Pro Tools, it's like mixing through a console. And then I monitor through this unit here. I can monitor Pro Tools, I can monitor CDs, anything I plug into the auxiliaries. It allows me to listen to the mix in different ways, in phase, out of phase, mute left, mute right, mono. And then of course this is my metering system, so I can make sure that my lefts and rights are balanced. It also is the brains behind my headphone system. And then I do a lot of mastering, and my mastering, I have several plugins, which I don't like to use a lot, but in the process I like to keep things analog, so I use the Manley Massive Passive Mastering EQ and the Manley Variable Mu Compressor Limiter, and this is the mastering version with the high pass filter and the T-bar mod, so it has that vintage tone. And the Crane Song Head, which is a harmonically enhanced digital device, which emulates the character of analog tape with your pentode, triode, and analog adjustments. It's also my master clock, so I can pick different sample rates and bit rates depending on, what sort of session I'm working on. Anywhere from 44.1 all the way up to 192. And then all my conversion is Apogee. And then, of course, my mic pre's are Avalon, Great River, Summit, Focusrite. And my monitoring is Dyne Audio and Genelec. And I use a Intel Mac to run the whole thing. And it's quite a potent little arsenal of stuff that gets the job done.
Business as usual, right? Nothing's changed.
Only the size of everything.
Only the size of everything.
But the sound hasn't changed. The sound is still there. The quality's still there. But because of the shift that I made, I can charge people less money, and I can save the client money, and it makes it easier for them when they realize they don't have to break the bank to get to realize their vision or their dream.
Mr. Long, I appreciate it. Thanks for taking the time to talk with us. If y'all have not been out to do any kind of work with Gary Long whatsoever, I'm telling you, you need to get out here and get it done. He's one of the best in Dallas.